Yom HaGirush, the day commemorating the very public and very synchronized expulsion of 850,000 Jews from Arab lands. I not only look back on this monstrous tragedy, but also look ahead and ask the question no one wants me to answer. Where is the next expulsion to be?
And now, the Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of IBM and the Holocaust and the Horrid, Roots of the Arab-Nazi Alliance in the Holocaust, which describes a bloody and animalistic massacre in Hebron in 1929, and then another one in Baghdad in 1941, both similar to the ones we saw unfold in Israel last month on October 7. Today's episode is sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by the just releasing third edition of the book, The Multi-Front War by threat analyst Ken Abramowitz. Get it through bookstores worldwide and join us for the official launch in the U.S. Senate Rayburn building in December. And it's co-sponsored by Phyllis in Jerusalem. Thank you, Phyllis, for assisting the show. Today, we welcome guests from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from, let's see, Australia, New Zealand again, Holland, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, Deutschland, Belgium, Great Britain, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, India, South Africa, and Israel, as well as other countries. If you have a question limited to today's unnerving and unwanted topic, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. Today, like our brothers and sisters in Israel, on campuses across America and the street corners of the world, I and my team are on a war footing. We have stood up a minute-to-minute blog at themorningrattle.com, and we are working in many other ways, publicly and privately. We are also supporting the documentation effort for the coming war crimes trials you will see in Jerusalem. Announcements at the Edwin Black Show and our companion YouTube site. We have just released more upsetting illustrated episodes. Our first Swords of Iron War coverage, recorded just after the October 7 massacres, has been released, followed by part 2 of the coverage, which challenged whether Gazans were actually innocent civilians or, more realistically, a complicit society. More on that shortly. Check both episodes at The Edwin Black Show or at our YouTube channel, which receives tens of thousands of views, and you'll find them both sad and unsettling. My tour continues. Most notably, I just returned from Los Angeles. Next month, December, you'll find me, as I said, at a congressional event with author Ken Abramowitz, launching the third edition of his prescient book, The Multi-Front War, in the U.S. Senate. In January, I'd appear at a 7-event series in Florida at FAU, 3 major Chabads, USF, and an expected 700-person audience at Boca Raton Synagogue. Internationally, in February, it's a return to Mexico City for a powerful community-wide 4-event series sponsored by Yad Vashem. In March of next year, I keynote the Canadian Privacy Conference in Montreal, plus the Ramapo College Holocaust and Genocide Center, and then much more from Queens, New York to Queensland, Australia. Get details of all my appearances from edwinblack.com/events, and let us meet up in your city. Stand tall, polish up the mezuzahs, and remember, freedom cannot ring unless the factual truth can sing. Everyone knows that Israel is in a fight for its survival, and simultaneously the Jewish people around the world and across our great country are in a coterminous battle for our own survival. I now declare us all to be in World War J. Write it down and lift your eyes. This is the prophesied battle. We shall not run from this one because we're out of sidewalk. We're way past enlightened talk. And as a major university informed me last month when they asked me to change my topic away from Israel, quote, facts will not be useful at this time. Next week, I start my first in a series of episodes, World War J. Now, we must all pick sides because the sides have already picked us. Even Senate Majority Leader, Democrat Chuck Schumer, admitted this week in a magnificent, incisive, and post-somnambulistic speech, the Jews of America now find themselves alone, said Schumer. He said what I've been saying. We are alone. Yes, we are becoming disconnected from a highly connected society, which is orchestrating our disconnection. But long before Schumer said it, long before I said it, long before you realized it, the Bible foretold it. Thumb back to Numbers 23:9. Quote, from the rocky peaks I see them, from the heights I view them. I see a people who live apart and do not consider themselves one of the nations. They are alone. Again in Deuteronomy, Rabbi, check it out. Deuteronomy 33:28. Israel shall live in safety, but alone. That's a quote. You, me, we are alone. But we are coming together, and together we will not be defeated. Our freedom will not be cheated. Our status will not be deleted, and our positions will not be unseated. So I call on 3-minute situation reports from a few of our leading voices. First, we hear from Sheldon Freilich, president of the Zionist Organization of Michigan, which is, by the way, the best chapter in the nation. Shell, take 3 minutes and tell us about Detroit and Michigan. Is the non-Jewish community rallying behind Israel and its Jewish citizens? And then tell us about the rising and kinetic, in-your-face threat from the Jew haters.
Thank you, Edwin. Good afternoon, everybody. After the horrible events of October 7th, the support in the Jewish community in support of Israel in their Hamas war has been phenomenal. Many grassroots public rallies were held. A federation sponsored a number of rallies at synagogues that had thousands of people in attendance. Even the Jewish Community Relations Council was able to initiate a letter from a number of Christian theologians, Christian clergy in support of Israel. So we're seeing strong support. We're seeing editorials in the newspapers in support. However, and I'm going to get into some incidents in a moment. However, from the Muslim side, you don't have that support and you don't have that condemnation of Hamas. In fact, the Jewish Community Relations Council has a strong Muslim advocacy outreach event, and only one leader, Muslim leader, signed that letter with the Christian clergy in support of Israel. Only one, and then he withdrew his name. He was a physician, threw his name after he received threats. So the Muslim community has not condemned Hamas at all. In fact, you've seen a number of pro-Hamas events in the Muslim and Arabic communities of Southeast Michigan. As you know, we have several 100,000 Arab residents in Southeast Michigan. It's the largest Arab community outside of the Middle East. A number of demonstrations in Dearborn, which is the epicenter, in support of Hamas. In fact, just on November 10th, I believe it was, a Shiite imam gave at a public library, gave a blistering public sermon in support of Iran, the imam of Iran, and the Al-Quds, Iranian Al-Quds militia, the head of that. And this Shiite imam has publicly come out in the past with the most virulent blood libels against Israel. Israel kills babies. And so this individual has been on in the public spouting this kind of venom, and nobody says anything. On the radio stations, it seems like when they invite somebody to talk about Israel-Hamas war from the Jewish community, they feel the need to bring in an Arab speaker who spouts the worst lies about the war and support for Hamas, with no challenges from the journalists. By the way, as you know, the March for Israel on November 14th in Washington, D.C., which had some 300,000 people in attendance, the Jewish community here in Detroit sent 900 plus people on 3 planes and a bus to attend the rally. 1/3 of those people could not get on a bus going from Washington Dulles Airport into D.C. to the rally because the bus drivers called us sick and wouldn't report from work when they heard where they were going to have to drive the buses to. The Jewish Federation here is trying to see if there's any kind of legal outcome they can do in response. On the campuses, you're having Jewish students doing pro-Israel rallies. Michigan State University, University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. However, the rallies at places like Michigan State University have been peaceful, other than graffiti against Jews. On the University of Michigan campus, it has not been calm. The pro-Hamas rallies have been accompanied by intimidation of Jewish students, insults to Jewish students. Jewish students on the campus feel intimidated and unsafe. The good thing is that the Jewish students on University of campus are very well organized. There's a group of 1,000 students that have had demonstrations on campus in support of not only Israel, but against these pro-Hamas resolutions that the student government has been trying to vote on.
Okay, Shel, that's an excellent report. Where's the lawsuit on these people who went to Washington, they flew there, and they couldn't get a bus out of the airport? Who's suing who?
Well, there's not a suit yet. The Federation is handling this because it was a Federation event, and they've contacted a civil rights attorney who's looking at it and contacting the U.S. attorney for the Washington, D.C. area to see if they can take legal action. What I've heard is that the bus companies subcontracted to other bus companies, so they don't know if they're trying to find out, do they take action against the bus companies or the individual drivers? So that's where it's at, but there's no suit as yet.
All right, let me ask in plain words. Are you and your family and your Jewish neighbors afraid at all about your presence in your communities and in your synagogues?
I'll say this, a lot of people are nervous going to synagogues and to Jewish events. They're looking quite actively. They want to see security at these events. The Federation has done a good job of providing security for Jewish institutions such as Jewish day schools. The synagogues and the Federation has also provided funding for security guards at the synagogues. When I say funding, I'm talking about a security guard on Shabbat morning, Saturday morning services. But there's, as far as security during the week, 7 days a week, each synagogue is responsible for their own security, and some synagogues have trouble coming up with the funds for that. There is a lot of nervousness, and there's nervousness about being in public wearing Jewish symbols.
All right, I'll have to come up to Detroit and wear my yarmulke. So listen, stick around. I may need you later. Now I call upon Rabbi Manes Kogan, a distinguished and articulate rabbi purveying moral clarity, heading up the Hillcrest Jewish Center in Queens, New York City, a truly vibrant synagogue that I recently visited in an epicenter of Jewish American life. Rabbi, take 3 minutes and tell us about Queens. Is the non-Jewish community rallying behind Israel and its Jewish citizens? And then tell us about the rising and kinetic in-your-face threat from the haters. And do not leave out what happened at the Hillcrest High School riot. Take the screen.
Yes. Thank you. Hi, Edwin. Hi, Mr. Freilich. Nice meeting you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, despite the circumstances. The first thing I want to say is that October 7 brought the Jewish community together in ways that we haven't seen in many, many years. So let me start with the positive. From my own congregation and with the other congregations in Queens, what we see here is an attempt and a resolution to come together, to be together, to leave aside, small differences that we may have, and to work together for Israel and for Judaism and for the safety of all of us. On a daily life, I don't feel the fear, but we have many important anti-Semitic episodes here in Queens. One of them, to begin, the simple one, is that many of the posters of the kidnap of the hostages were removed by people we see and thrown into the garbage, especially around Queens College, but not only. Maybe you heard about the teacher in a Hillcrest High School that the students identified as pro-Israel. She had they found a picture that she had a sign that says, "I stand with Israel," and basically organized a pogrom inside the school. She needed to run and to hide. These are 14 and 15-year-old students, mostly minorities. The authorities are trying to, including the Board of President and the Chancellor, are trying to find out exactly what happened. I think they don't rush to blame the children for being anti-Semitic, but I think that it was a very, very scary situation here in Queens. And the other thing I want to share that was reported in the Times of Israel, and it's very close to me because my daughter happened to be there and happened at Queens College, is that Hillel organized a presentation of a rabbi and an imam, very, very well known in the community, to try to bring some clarity to the students. What was intended to be like a very enlightening session turned to be some sort of mayhem, with accusations from the Muslim students to the imam to say, "You don't represent us," and traitor. So it really became a very, very strange situation. And today I was at Queens College visiting my daughter, and across the hall is the Muslim Students Association. You see a big Palestinian flag there, something that I haven't seen. We're working together before October 7. It's like everything broke apart.
All right. Well, remind me to pay a visit to Queens College the next time I come up to your part of the world. I made a note about something you said, and I know you've spoken to your congregation about this. You said that I've never seen the Jewish people come together as much as I have following this horrible event. But I have actually studied the other time when they came together, January 1933. It was after Hitler came to power in Berlin. And you'll read about this in my book, The Transfer Agreement, that the Jews suddenly realized who they were. Whether they self-identified or not, they were identified by others. Now, let's go into this Hillcrest High School thing. So these kids were rioting. They were running through the school, and the police had to be summoned to rescue this woman. How old were these kids?
So these are 14, 15, 16-year-old kids.
All right, so they don't have any knowledge. We have extreme lack of knowledge, and they're being driven not by their own knowledge, but by TikTok and by false and by false information.
That's correct. And by the way, this is the same is in the majority of the world. The same is in Argentina. The same is in the Arab countries as well.
That's right, and we have to address that. It's something that I'm working on. Of course, it becomes a little difficult when major universities say facts at this time will not be useful. Thank you, Rabbi. Now, finally, we want to turn to distinguished constitutional litigator and defender of Jewish rights, attorney Nathan Lewin. Earlier this week, the Brandeis Center, one of our best, filed the latest lawsuit in a coming tsunami of hard-hitting lawsuits against colleges and universities. This one against UC Berkeley, which I know and everyone in the Jewish community knows is a cesspool of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel agitation. Brandeis president Elie Lewin, who filed the suit, could not attend the show because she is traveling. So we have the next best thing, Nathan Lewin. Nat, take 3 minutes and tell us what this lawsuit against Berkeley is all about and what are its chances.
Well, the lawsuit is a very important effort to get the courts. And of course, I'll discuss that in a minute. The likelihood of success depends very much not only on the judge who would be assigned to this case, but also to the law clerks of that judge, and then ultimately to the Court of Appeals. But the importance of the case is that it is a direct challenge under the federal civil rights laws to a state university which has a bylaw that essentially forecloses those who have Zionist views from speaking or having any rights to address people at that university. It's the most outrageous effort made really by Berkeley and by the students at Berkeley with the acceptance of the administration to silence anyone who has a Zionist view. And the complaint is a very detailed and itemized statement of very responsible professionals, professors, and others who are barred from speaking at Berkeley by this bylaw, which prohibits pro-Zionists. Essentially, the dean of the Berkeley Law School, Erwin Chemerinsky, who's a very well-known attorney, known for his very liberal views and arguments in the Supreme Court, he acknowledges that he is barred by this bylaw. And here is a direct challenge to what the students at Berkeley have done. They are 23 Berkeley law student organizations have enacted the policies to discriminate and exclude Jewish students, faculty, and scholars. And this is a lawsuit which cites the federal civil rights laws and says, and I think it's obvious that that the complaint is correct, that what they have done at Berkeley is they've denied equal protection, which is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, and have denied the free exercise of religion by this bylaw. And the complaint clearly states, I mean, for the first time, I think, in legal complaint or pleadings, it states that anti-Zionism is discrimination against those who recognize the Jews' ancestral heritage, in particular the Jews' historic connection to the land of Israel and the right of the Jewish people to self-determination in their ancestral homeland as key components of their Jewish identity. In other words, anybody who's a Zionist and would not satisfy the anti-Zionist requirements of this bylaw is being discriminated against as a Jew, whether or not he would otherwise have rights But the drawing the line at Zionism and defining those who are prohibited as anyone who is a Zionist effectively denies Jews their identity. This is a very important proposition. And as I say, it depends on which judge is ultimately assigned. To my knowledge, there's not yet been a district judge in California assigned to the case. And as has been, I think, become clear from recent decisions that I've been involved in, it's not only the judge, but the law clerks. And the young people who become law clerks these days are frequently those who are most pro-Palestinian and those who were told at a young age, be sure to enroll in the law schools. And the law schools have been teaching progressivism, supposedly, which ends up really being largely anti-Israel and anti-Semitic.
Thank you very much for your remarks. I made several notes. First of all, this Berkeley bylaw that excludes pro-Zionist or pro-Israel speakers. So in other words, if I want to come in and speak about the Holocaust or alternative energy or international law or eugenics, I would be barred, correct?
Well, unless you were ready to repudiate Zionism. In other words, it's essentially a kind of a declaration that you repudiate Zionism.
All right, next. I noticed, and I should tell our viewers, Nat Lewin has been up to the Supreme Court 28 times, teaches Supreme Court law, and is one of the leading Supreme Court litigators in the United States. When you make these remarks about the law clerks, this follows up on your recent comment that the student bar associations and the law schools have become infected with anti-Semitism, and they're producing law clerks, and increasingly the law clerks are actually subsuming the activities of the court itself. And we are seeing before our eyes the infection of the legal recourse, which is the only recourse the Jews have left, is the law. And I'm very sorry to hear about that. Now, based on what you know, do you think that this lawsuit has a chance?
I think it has more than a chance. I think with a fair judge and a proper hearings and discovery, I think it should win. Absolutely. It's absolutely correct. And Berkeley may be, as a result of being named in this lawsuit and being concerned about a judgment being entered against it, in which it might, have to pay damages to a whole number of people who are, although not named, but described individually in the complaint. Berkeley might in some way take action to overrule and override this discriminatory bylaw that prohibits anyone who is pro-Zionist from appearing to speak at the school.
All right. Now, I should also mention, in fairness, that I believe that Nat Lewin has full confidence in the litigator who filed the lawsuit. Is that not correct, Nat?
Well, the Brandeis Center, the president of which is my daughter and partner, Aliza, is the lead plaintiff really in the case. The complaint itself, of course, is filed by a California law firm, Ellis, George, Cipollone, O'Brien, LLP, who are the lawyers, Eric George and David Carroll, who are the attorneys for the plaintiffs. So my daughter is not listed as an attorney in the case.
All right. Thank you very much, Nat. You've made a difference. Now it's my turn to talk. My pre-mano focuses on two burning issues. I return to my theme that there are few, if any, innocent civilians in Gaza. Here we see a terror and death culture where the youngsters trained to be killers and aspired to be martyrs, just as was done in Nazi Germany, and their mothers glorify their death so long as they can kill a Jew on the way to martyrdom. Recall the Hitler Youth, which was trained from preschool. Recall the Heimwehr or the Home Front and similar youngster regiments organized in the closing days of the May 1945 collapse of the Third Reich. They manned cannon and machine guns and swore allegiance to the Third Reich. Now the hostages are telling us how ordinary citizens in Gaza helped their capture and joined in the beatings and abuse. One hostage who escaped tells of being grabbed by an ordinary Gazan and turned over to Hamas to be re-kidnapped. Another tells of an Arab doctor from the hospital who kept him captive and denied him medical attention. And the nauseating videos have emerged of ordinary Gazan men and women and children jeering and throwing stones at the Red Cross ambulances ferrying released hostages to freedom. Innocent civilians, where are they? Raise your hand if you wish to live in peace, live and let live, and desist from violence. I and others have been asking for weeks. May I see one? I don't even see one. Just this week, Hamas supporters, innocent civilians on the so-called West Bank, tortured and lynched a black man named Hamza Ahmed Mubarak, 31 years old, and hung his body upside down, his dead body upside down from a pole to cheers. He looked like any black man in Chicago or Manhattan. Hey, Black Lives Matter who support Hamas, wasn't this black man black enough for you? I didn't hear you say a word, you hypocrites. My second on fire pre-mono topic is an advanced look at the political upheaval we will see unfold next year. The Democrats and the Democratic base are being hijacked by its Jew-hating base at a vastly more accelerated rate than I originally predicted. Pro-Palestinians are planning major riots at the Democratic Convention in Chicago next year that may rival the infamous and riotous Democratic Convention that I, as a journalist, covered in 1968. Here is a political fact. Write this down, guys. The Democrats have an ace in the hole that defies every poll, every debate, and every headline. It's called the low propensity voter and GOTV. That delivers an extra few percent for the party in every election. Now listen up. GOTV is not a television station. It stands for a little known presidential executive order known as Get Out the Vote, number 14019, also known as Promoting Access to Voting, issued by Joe Biden in March of 2021. Low propensity voters is the term given by Democratic strategists to a group of generally uninformed and marginal potential voters, people who are clueless about the issues, who generally do not even follow the news and do not vote. Often these people are in prison or just released from prison or getting ready to go to prison. Biden's EO has established a whole of government program to identify, provide materials to, and bring these people to the polls with the expectation they will vote the straight Democratic ticket. The agencies covered stretch from the national scientific laboratories, such as the National Institute of Standards, to the Federal Bureau of Prisons and the U.S. Marshals. And these government agencies have been ordered to work with so-called third-party organizations to mobilize these clueless voters. They've all been enlisted to seek out these so-called low propensity voters and deliver them to the voting booth. A group of 23 senators has been demanding information about this unknown program and have deemed it a hidden program with hidden aspects. And for 6 months, the Biden administration has stonewalled the Senate on providing any details of any of the numerous programs involved in GOTV. This means while you and I are struggling to debate and understand the issues and pay attention to the polls, the final edge may come down to people who are low propensity voters who have no idea of the issues they are voting on. And this brings me directly to my monologue. Yom HaGirush, the day commemorating the very public and very synchronized expulsion of 850,000 Jews from Arab lands. I not only look back on this monstrous tragedy, but also look ahead and ask the question no one wants me to answer. Where is the next expulsion to be? Now we gather to observe a commemoration centuries in the making, but only recently added to our calendar. Yom HaGirush, it means the day commemorating the expulsion, and specifically the 850,000 Jews mercilessly, publicly, and synchronously expelled from Arab home countries where they had dwelled peacefully as long as 27 centuries, 1,000 years before Muhammad, in this monstrous ethnic cleansing achieved according to the Eichmann method of pauperization first, and under the baton of their escaped Nazi co-conspirators, the Jews of Iraq, Morocco, Egypt, and numerous other Arab countries were identified, gathered up, and then expelled, penniless and stateless. They were threatened with concentration camps and mass murder unless Israel accepted them as refugees, which was achieved by a massive airlift to Israel, led by Alaska Airlines. You heard me right, Alaska Airlines. The Arabs expected a humanitarian bomb would cripple and destroy the young state of Israel, but that did not occur. Israel took them in by the hundreds of thousands and thus converted itself from a Jewish nation, about half of which was not from Berlin and Brooklyn and Bialystok, but from Baghdad, Beirut, and Bizerte. It exposes the lie that Israel's population are settlers or colonists from Europe, when in fact they are from down the road, up the coast and over the mountain. It is true, if you go to Google and type Jews expulsion, you will be prompted to a long list of cities, countries, and kingdoms. But this expulsion was not orchestrated centuries ago, but in modern times, just after World War II, in my lifetime, in full sight of the United Nations and the world, which did nothing as usual. The UN and the world always does nothing. Yet this horrid humanity was forgotten and wiped away from the public consciousness. That's where I enter stage right. It began with my book, Banking on Baghdad, which resurrected the forgotten Arab Nazi joint pogrom of June 1st and June 2nd, 1941, known as the Farhud, which in Arabic means violent dispossession, in which children were killed in front of their parents and parents in front of their children, mass beheadings and rapes in Baghdad. Hey, sound familiar? You're getting the idea. We have been here before, and not just once. People of Iraqi and Sephardic Jewish descent came at me from everywhere, created the Farhud Recognition Project to encourage me to do more, and I did more. I published another volume, The Farhud, Roots of the Arab Nazi Alliance in the Holocaust. My book not only tracked the Farhud, but how far this forgotten pogrom it was. Only the first step on the road to the forgotten mass expulsion of 850,000 Jews just after the modern state of Israel was created. I embarked on a worldwide tour to enlighten the world. I was supported by groups everywhere, and through our joint action, I and they proclaimed from the floor of the United Nations in a live globally streamed event that henceforth June 1 would commemorate the Sephardic Kristallnacht, the Farhud. The next step was to advance global awareness of the expulsion in the early 1950s. The Israeli government eventually declared November 30th a day of commemoration with a completely unrecognizable name, and therefore one day I, consulting with my friends at the Israeli embassy here, I asked what the word for expulsion was. I was told it was Girush, and so I gave a name to the day devoted to the events that occurred yet were obscured. But I say the remembrance has now endured as a global reminder of the affliction we suffered and the addiction our enemies embrace. And now, because I shocked so many by predicting last June, a few months ago, that the next Farhud would not be in any Arab country, but in Israel, and then in the United States, I have been called upon to predict where the next expulsion, not exodus, but forcible expulsion will take place. It will not be in Iran or even Syria. Please make me wrong. It will probably be right here at home in America, in localities, and the first one shall not be Mississippi or Missouri, but perhaps, maybe, perhaps, an enlightened state, crammed with wonderful universities, and that state will be Michigan. How will this unfold? The anti-Semitism has not grown around us. It has merely unmasked itself. The dense vapor of Jew hatred has finally condensed to saturate every corner of this country. It is Michigan, which embraces such Arab centers of Jew hatred as Dearborn, Hamtramck, Detroit, and the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, which will manifest an expulsion city by city. The Jews are already being expelled by rioters and protesters at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor, where they're afraid to walk on the campus and are sometimes trapped within their rooms and their hillels. So here's how it's going to unfold. Step one, write this down, guys. The Jew haters will need a dehumanizing term. Settler, colonist, Zionist, genocide abettors. Take your pick. Jews will be stigmatized. City councils will pass resolutions such as the one earlier this week in Oakland and the one attempted at Burlington, Vermont some time ago. Jews will be canceled out of government jobs, then corporate jobs, and then boycotted out of their own shops. They will be prosecuted for FARA violations. Special assessments will follow. Eminent domain actions will seize the property of their synagogues and Jewish centers, and new zoning rules will preclude new ones. Eventually, they will be effectively ruled unwelcome and pressured out by both law and practice. This is what Germany did and the Arab countries emulated. Remember, in Chicago, when I was growing up, Kenilworth and Winnetka suburbs were Jew-free per local covenant. This country expelled its Japanese to camps, its Indians to reservations, and its black people to ghettos. All it needs is political leadership in the Democratic Party, such as Rashida Tlaib, already sanctioned by Congress for anti-Semitic speech, and a mass infusion of pro-Palestinian agitators into local government, the school boards, the zoning boards, the prosecutor offices, city councils, something which we shall all see massively unfold in the next 6 months as the anti-Jewish movement uses the double-edged sword of physical violence and embedded official hatred. We have all seen the numerous government officials in recent days who have exposed themselves as pro-Hamas, pro-terror, Jew haters, from the most senior ranks of the Central Intelligence Agency to Maryland's anti-bias task force to the false diversity panels. This is the country I love, that allowed 33,000 members of the Democratic Party's Action Group, also known as the Ku Klux Klan, to march on Washington, and Washington's image to be blown up 2 stories high in Madison Square Garden to host a wall-to-wall mass rally of American Nazis wearing swastikas during the rise of Hitler, and where the state of Connecticut in 1938, with the support of its legislature and Governor Wilbur Cross, with the assistance of the Carnegie Institution, undertook a massive program of mass internal deportation of its own assistants to other states, because eugenicists did not like the color of their hair or the content of their chromosomes. Stop telling me never again is just a slogan. It's the whale of the harpoon of history, just waiting to bring us back from whence we came. Don't sit back and wait for me to be vindicated once again. Please prove me wrong. Take action. I left out a lot, so I turned to the world's expert in the expulsion of Jews from Arab countries, my friend Rabbi Elie Abadie, speaking from Dubai, where he is the rabbi, but long ago he headed up justice for Jews from Arab countries. What say you, Rabbi? Can it happen again? And can it happen here in America? Shalom, Rabbi.
Hello, my dear friend Edwin. Thank you very much for inviting me to be in your illustrious program. As you mentioned very eloquently about Yom HaGirush, the day that we commemorate the expulsion, persecution, imprisonment of almost 1 million Jews in 10 Arab countries that occurred in 1947 for 3 days in a row, November 30th, December 1st, and December 2nd. As a son of a family that suffered from that Yom HaGirush, I can tell you almost firsthand the atrocities that appeared and that occurred, as my parents will tell me the story that they were living next door to the synagogue, and the Arab mobs, aided by the police, the Syrian police at that time, was in Aleppo, Syria, climbed over the fence of the synagogue, entered the synagogue, they burned the Torah scrolls, holy books, carried the rabbi out, kicked him out, and entered into many Jewish homes and Jewish businesses, ransacking everything, killing, maiming, and injuring many Jews. It's a day that was not known by many people, even among our own co-religionists, and that is why this date has been now set aside officially in Israel from 2014 to commemorate this day, not just in Israel, but all around the world, wherever there is a Jewish community and an Israeli embassy or consulate. Whenever we speak of Jewish refugees, or whenever we speak actually of Middle Eastern refugees, the whole world only speaks about Arab refugees from the 1948 Israel Independence War. They never mention and never speak about the Jewish refugees, which really number much more, almost double the amount of Arab refugees. Our losses are 10 times more, as it is estimated to be over $300 billion in today's dollars. The difference also that our Jewish refugees were not combatant as the Arab refugees at that time. They were combatant. They were not really just civilians, as we see in Gaza in the last several weeks, that most of the population there is combatant population. And more than that, also that at least these Jewish refugees were able to find a home in Israel, almost 500,000 of them, and the other half in many other countries in the world where they established themselves, they became part of society, and they live a better life. There hasn't been any Jewish refugee camp anywhere in the world that hosted these Jewish refugees. And not only that the Jewish refugees received $0 in support by the United Nations or any other country, while the Arab refugees, up until today, they have probably received over $90 billion on a yearly basis, receiving money to support the UNRWA and many other of their needs. And so these Jewish refugees, it's time for the world to know about them. It's time for the world to recognize them, to give redress. And certainly the Arab countries should take that responsibility. Those 10 Arab countries who expelled, imprisoned, and persecuted their Jews to recognize that and accept that responsibility. It is also very well known that most of the Jews, they left with the shirt on their back and maybe just the cost of a train pass or plane pass ticket and nothing more. And yet they were able to establish themselves in any country and in every country that they left. Finally, this topic and subject is being taught in schools in Israel. There are being conferences now all around the world about it. And it's something that even the United States Congress, Resolution 185, established that whenever they speak of peace in the Middle East and the issue of Arab refugees come up, then the issue of Jewish refugees should come up and need to come up for equity and for peace, because there were not only one refugee population at the heel of the establishment of the state Israel, but there were two refugee populations, two very different refugee populations, different circumstances and different consequences that they suffered. As a son of these refugees, having come back to the Emirates, is kind of closing the circle. Having been born in an Arab country, raised in an Arab country, emigrated again to find a safe haven outside Lebanon and Syria, and we were able to finally return to the Emirates in a sense. It's a vindication. It's a vindication and a recognition that we Jews have been resident and citizens and inhabitants of the Middle East, as you mentioned earlier, for over 3,500 years. And we're not settlers or colonizer or newcomers. We have been here, as you said, prior to many of the Arabs, prior to Islam by thousands of years, prior to any nation state that is in the Middle East. The Jews have had their commonwealth, the first temple, the second temple, and it's something that ought to be recognized and understood very well.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. If anyone knows about this topic, it's you. I made a couple of notes. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, I note that they try to claim the Jews were not in Israel before 1948, yet we're getting ready to celebrate the birth of a Jew from 2,000 years ago, right?
Correct.
And that was Jesus. How did he get there? And what temple was he worshiping? Was he not worshiping at the Jewish temple?
That, as you very well know, Mahmoud Abbas usurps that history and he calls him a Palestinian. I mean, with such a chutzpah and such ignorance that he demonstrates by calling him a Palestinian and ignoring that he was a Jew, it shows that it's not just ignorance, it shows malice from their part. There hasn't been a time in which there was no Jewish presence in the land of Israel.
That's correct. And even after the Romans expelled most of the Jews and renamed the land of Israel, Syria, Palestina, and it was named not for Arabs, it was named for Greek island invaders, the Plishtim. Even during that time, there were Jews, of course, working on their Torah in the Galilee. I noticed you also made reference to refugee camps. There are Arab refugee camps throughout Gaza and throughout the West Bank. Can you give me one reason why there's an Arab refugee camp in an area run, controlled, and governed by so-called Palestinian Arabs?
I can give you 10 reasons. One of the main ones is money, money, and money. Because as long as they keep them in refugee camps, they're going to get money from the United Nations, the United States, the European Union. They're going to get pity. They can use them as pawns against Israel. As long as they're sitting in refugee camps, they could still demand a right of return.
So these are fake refugees in fake refugee camps, supported by a fake refugee agency, which is different from all the other refugees from Ukraine and from the Jewish refugees and Asia. And that is part of a fake world peace organization that calls itself the United Nations, which was co-established by Stalinist Russia and Mao Zedong in China, along with the Allies, which was never interested in peace. And there's absolutely nothing stopping these so-called refugees from walking out of their camp and across the street to have a Starbucks or to order a slice of pizza. Now, I want to ask you, you have studied this probably longer than anyone else for decades. I want to ask you, do you think that there could be another Jewish expulsion somewhere in the world?
Unfortunately, I have to say yes. There could definitely be Jewish expulsion somewhere in the world. And I'm seeing it coming sooner than later.
And do you think it's possible that such a thing could happen in the United States?
I think eventually it could happen. The situation can deteriorate more and more and more. And of course, it's not going to start with expulsion. It's going to start, as it already has started in the last 2 years, and more pronounced now. Protests against the Jews, demonizing the Jews, boycotting Jewish businesses, boycotting Jewish institutions, not allowing Jewish students to enter universities and work. And that's how it's going to start. And eventually it could definitely end in expulsion.
Well, for heaven's sakes, Lewin and the Brandeis Center just filed a lawsuit for the very topic that Jews who believe in Israel just are not allowed to speak, which sounds like something that you and I are very familiar. Thank you, Rabbi. Stick around to the best of your ability. I realize it's late out there. Let's go to Sheldon Freilich, our other panelist. He's with the ZOA Michigan. Shel, take the screen and tell me what the heck is going on in your state of Michigan and how dangerously close are we getting to something that I maybe am predicting?
God forbid that your prediction would come true, but there is a risk that it could become true. But I want to ask Rabbi. I don't know if is Rabbi Kogan still with us, because I want to ask him a question about what he was reporting, and I want to tie it into
Rabbi Kogan. Let us know if you're still there. Turn on your camera. Keep your mic off. Go ahead. Ask Rabbi Kogan a question. If he's not there, I'll answer for him.
Well, this this riot at the high school that he just described. 2 questions: were the majority of the students that participated in that riot, were they Arab students? And secondly, did anything happen from the school administration to those students as far as discipline?
All right, I'm not sure that Rabbi is still in front of his camera now, but let me answer from what I know, because I have been following this. I believe that the majority of these students were not of Arab descent, but were African American, local from Queens. And to the best of my knowledge, they're trying to cover this up and to keep it quiet because nobody wants to emphasize this kind of thing. Of course, we've learned that when you don't pay attention to these events, that they can come across. Tell us just how riotous and bad and unwelcome it is for the Jews in certain parts of Michigan now. And if there was one city that would become the leading edge of this, would it be Dearborn? Would it be Detroit? Give me your thought.
It would be Dearborn. It would be Dearborn, where the majority of the population is Muslim, is Arabic, and you mentioned where the school where the majority of the students are African American. As you've reported on many of your programs, we have a real problem with Black anti-Semitism in the Black community growing at a phenomenal pace. And so it's been connected to the Arab anti-Semitism, the Arab Jew hatred. And I'll give you an example of an incident that just happened here that I didn't get a chance to report on just a few weeks ago after the October 7th Israel-Hamas war began. At a local major hospital here, there was a pro-Hamas demonstration, a white coat demonstration by the medical staff on the sidewalk in front of the hospital. There they were in their white coats. The majority of them were Arab staff. It wasn't reported in the news media. of course, and the university later on did not denounce the protest. It did come out and said you can do a protest on a public sidewalk, not on hospital property, but you can't wear hospital badges or identity because then you're tying the hospital into your protest. So the hospital did come out somewhat strongly against this demonstration. But why would physicians come out and have this kind of demonstration right at the edge of hospital property? It reminds me of the Gazan hospitals that were covering up for all the terrorist activities in their hospitals.
That's right. All right. You've said that well. I know that the medical schools have been impacted in the same way that the law schools have been impacted. We all know about the dental student who said he wanted to kill his Jewish patients. And we all know about the other medical students said she wanted to poison her patients. And just today, we have a video of a member of the faculty of one of the medical schools, and she's tearing down the signs, just livid. All right, let's take a couple of questions. One, this is from Chicago. Did the Holocaust Museum oppose your efforts on the Farhud in Yom HaGirush? Yes, they did. The Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. opposed it. Rabbi Abadie knows this, as does everyone in the community who was involved in this. They opposed it because the idea of recognizing the Arab Nazi violence, we're talking about actual Nazis, swastika-bearing Nazis in the Arab countries, violated the Holocaust Museum's mission statement. And their mission statement was to document the destruction of European Jewry. So that automatically excluded the Jews of Morocco, North Africa, Algeria, Syria, Lebanon, Baghdad. And if they didn't create the storyline, they didn't want it to come to fruition. It took a lot of protest by a lot of groups. And so they did protest that. Now they've come to the fore. We have Rabbi Kogan back. And Shel, you wanted Rabbi Kogan to ask who was engaged in this riot at Hillcrest High. Was it children of Arab descent or local children? Rabbi Kogan, was it local children or children of Arab descent, or what was it?
So again, I can tell you from what I understand, I don't think it has to do with children necessarily of Arab descent. We don't have many Arab descents in our area. What we have is the Muslims that are in Queens. Most of the Muslims that are around here are from Bangladesh and from Pakistan. That's number one. I think we are many African Americans as well. And I'm not sure it has to do necessarily with, as you say, the knowledge of what's going on there. I think, if you ask my opinion, it looks very similar to what happened after George Floyd in the city. It's like, an opportunity to rioting and without any knowledge, doing a lot of damage.
Shel wanted to know, he's joined us back. Is this being hushed up? Is it being talked about? Are they investigating it?
So there are two things. The first one, I think they transferred the teacher to another school, which, again, I don't think is a good move. Maybe it's a good move for the teacher, but not for... It's like taking your kippah when someone is hitting you. I think it emboldens the attackers. The leadership of the borough of Queens, the borough president, and I think other officials, because in general, Queens has been a very quiet neighborhood, borough, number one, and number two, Queens is probably the most diverse county in the country. We have hundreds and more than hundreds languages and ethnicities. So I think the leadership of Queens is very interested in maintaining that these things is not going to be the norm. Let's put it this way. And so on one hand, it's good because I think they will try really to work to stop things from happening. But on the other hand, I think they may be hiding their head under, in the sand. So we shall see how we are going to what's going to unfold. But I just saw the chancellor of the school and the borough president and David Wepling giving a press conference.
All right, Shel, do you have a comeback to the rabbi?
Your comment, Rabbi, where they said that you fear that they'll just try and hold their head down because they don't want it to happen again, but they're just going to put their head down and try and avoid it from happening. If you don't stamp it out, if you don't stand up to it, when I say you, I'm saying the organization, the institution, it won't go away. It's going to get worse.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And the group of rabbis, we are asking to see if maybe we can meet with the superintendent of the schools, with the school principal. We have a group of rabbis that we put together immediately. Interestingly enough, all the liberal rabbis in Queens try to address it. Just want to mention something, because I say liberal rabbis in Queens. The majority of the Jews in Queens at this point are Bukharians, Sephardic, Orthodox. So it's very far from the time in which you have the huge conservative synagogues with the most involved, I would say, long 3 generations or 2 generations American involved in politics, if you know what I mean. It's a very different population. It's a very different form of connection. The majority of the Bukhari and Sephardic rabbis don't have any connection with non-Jewish leaders, very, very little or non-interfaith. So I think that, we are facing challenging times. I also think that we are going to find very soon if this was an isolated episode or not, because if it is, as quoting Edwin, I hope you prove me wrong. I hope that we don't need to have this conversation, but if not, it's going to come very soon in one way or another. And I think the community is ready. I think the Jewish leadership in the liberal community has the contacts with the elected officials all the time.
All right, let me just add on here some clarity. The rabbi said that a lot of the Jews in Queens are of Bukharian background, and a lot of people don't know what that means. Bukharian background essentially means they're Jews from the Asian steppes, from Uzbekistan, from Bulgaria, from the various stands, and they are insular. They're well established, but they are insular, and unlike the other Jews in Queens throughout the United States, they do not have the kind of interfaith relations that most of our communities have and cherish. We have a second question, and we're running out of time. Would these expulsions in Michigan be isolated, or would they be connected? So I think what we're going to see is Jews being forced out by policy and by prejudice, and then being ushered out by these other methodologies. The same thing that we're suing for in Berkeley, automatically saying, okay, you're Jewish, you're pro-Israel, and you can't speak on any topic. That's amazing. The head of the law school could not speak there. So I believe what you'll see is Dearborn, Michigan would be first. I think there'd be a combination of violence and there'd be a combination of policy. And then they would work together behind the scenes to claim, well, we're trying to protect you now from all the violence. So here's the bus, and you can take it out of here, and we'll compensate you for your land. And ultimately, you'll be expelled. Remember, the state of Connecticut organized to expel 90% of its residents under the eugenics program of the Carnegie Institution, and the state of California and others expelled all its Japanese citizens. And Nat Lewin knows that that horrific act was upheld by the Supreme Court as being absolutely necessary. So the answer is it'll be in Dearborn first, or someplace like Dearborn, and then it'll spread to another place, and pretty soon it'll be county-wide, and then other counties, and sure enough, the Jews will be expelled. I should also say something that most people don't know, but that I know, and that was written in my book, The Transfer Agreement. Most people don't know that thousands of Jews of East European descent get ready for this, Rabbi Kogan, were ushered out of New York City. They were removed. It was called the Industrial Removal Office. And they took these Jews and they put them on trains and they spread them out to the countryside so they would no longer be in New York. Please, I'm begging to be wrong. Okay? All right, gotta go. That's it. We're out of time. I want you to hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 1 minute away. But first, I thank my really knowledgeable and esteemed guests, Nat Lewin, Rabbi Kogan, Rabbi Abadie, and Sheldon Freilich, and the others. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows at the EdwinBlackShow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at the Edwin Black Show. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on that thing called X, as well as Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom, repeating an earlier one. Take names, because your name is being taken. Take a stand while you can still stand. Take courage as you must. Thank you, world, and I am zooming out. Bless all of you.